Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Three Financial Steps to Take During the Pandemic. Today is Wednesday, April 15th, and this is the day that we usually file taxes, except not in 2020, where things have been extended to July 15th. So let's go ahead and begin. A couple of things about me. I have a PhD in sociology, and that PhD didn't exactly land me into the world of riches right away, so I have my own experience living in poverty. But once I caught a break, I built a fabulous career working on justice system reform. And during that time, I also got very interested in money. So I became a bit of a money nerd, trying to save as much of my paycheck as I could. That career ended in 2018. And so I've been reinventing myself for the last 2 years, becoming a financial coach and building online courses. And at the moment, I'm waiting to hit the road in my RV. I'm working on selling my house, and I will be working as a financial coach and an educator and a consultant and a researcher from the internet while I am traveling the country. So that is my plan, a little bit about my history. And I'm a graduate of the Financial Coach Academy. My motto is coaching with compassion. I want to help people reach financial freedom and take charge of their money. Since I have lived in poverty, there's just almost nothing worse than that despair and the lack of hope that you feel when you're just struggling to get by day after day. And if I can help people stop worrying about money and take charge of their future, that would be a wonderful thing. Here's your typical disclaimer. Now, this information is for educational purposes only. It's intended to help you make better decisions. I do not include specific guidance for your circumstances. I am a financial coach. That means I work to help you, give you information to teach you how to master your money, work with mindsets, budgets, all those types of things, but I do not sell any investments. So that's not something that I do. So this webinar focuses on three big action steps. Everything that I do is about taking action. If I just give you the information and you sit on it, I will have failed my mission. So let's talk about the three big action steps. The first item is to ramp up your savings. The second, I want you to take a long-range perspective and avoid the panic. And your step three is to create an emergency financial plan. So before we begin, let's talk a little bit about where we are today, coronavirus, COVID-19. The first outbreak occurred in China in December 2019. And since then, it has become a worldwide epidemic, a pandemic. And this is the latest data up to April 12th. And this is already, I've been doing these webinars weekly, and this is the first week where we're starting to maybe breathe a sigh of relief. So the green line over here is the United States, and you can see this huge uptick of cases up until the end of March, a decline, and then another huge uptick. And now we are starting to, we hope, even out and stabilize a little bit. So these are the other countries that are considerably ahead of us. I know that Italy has been in the news a lot, and it's just been a horrific health and economic situation. One of the sources that I like is Johns Hopkins University. So they have an interactive map, and let's hope that this will load up politely tonight. And it does. And this allows you to see day by day where we are with the number of confirmed cases and the total number of deaths. It also provides a map. So this map is loading. Over 2 million confirmed cases, over 133,000 deaths now. And so what this allows you to do is to look at at the map within the United States. So you can scroll in here and you can see where all of the red hotspots are. So there's New York City, but you can see, like, you know, California has really done a very good job of containing the coronavirus. Florida is starting to get heavy, but you can also look within your own county. So for instance, I am in Virginia, and let's see, James City County, we've had 2 deaths and 132 confirmed. We have been one of the hardest hit counties in Virginia, and the first death has been in my county. So this is something that you can, it's very interesting, but it's fascinating to look at this over several weeks, because this map looks much better to me than it did last week. Gives me a little bit of hope as to where we are right now. Now let's talk about the federal government responses. So I'm going to give you just a quick summary. So the first phase was March 5th. This was for vaccine research and development, about $8.3 billion to treat and prevent the spread of COVID-19. We then went to phase 2. This is March 18th, and this was paid sick leave, unemployment benefits, and tax relief. One of the challenges of this is that it did provide a 14-day paid leave, but for only some American workers, so about half. It provided increased funding for food stamps and tax credits, increased Medicaid funding to states. So that was in early March, and we are now at phase 3. This was passed just a few weeks ago, March 27th, and this is a stimulus emergency aid package. $2 trillion, $250 billion set aside for direct payments, $350 billion in small business loans, $250 billion in unemployment, $500 billion in loans for distressed companies. And so that is the CARES Act. And now there's also talk about a phase 4, a fourth package, just maybe more direct payments to individuals. This is something that we'll have to just wait and see what happens. So with this third package, one of the big things is a stimulus check. So actually, if you e-filed, the odds are that you may have received a deposit in your bank account today. I know my bank account did have an automatic deposit from the IRS. So if you haven't checked, you might want to check. If you typically do not use direct deposit, you're going to have to wait a while for your check to arrive. And this was $1,200 for individuals, $2,400 for joint tax returns. If you didn't have much tax liability, you would get at least $600 for individuals, and families receive an additional $500 for each qualifying child. And the payment does progressively reduce for higher income earners, starting at $75,000 for singles, $150,000 if you're filing a joint return. And if you at this point are not sure whether you're going to qualify for one, you can check this calculator and put in your information, and it will tell you. Also, the IRS has just, I think today, started a new program, so you can check online the status of your check or direct deposit. It's not, I haven't included it yet. It seems that there are some bugs that they need to work out. A lot of people are getting feedback that the information is not available. The other piece of the CARES Act had to do with retirement funds. And since we're talking about emergency planning, what happens for a lot of people, their funds, if they do have funds, are tied up into retirement accounts. So the CARES Act actually has some allowances that make this withdrawing from a retirement account much more appealing. So this is just good to the end of 2020, but if you have an individual retirement account, here are the two changes that allow you to take distributions early. Now, typically distributions prior to age 59 and a half were subject to a 10% tax. And in 2020, that is no longer true. So you can take up to $100,000 out of your IRA and not be subject to that 10% tax. The second piece is that distributions up to $100,000 this year, you can report it as income over 3 years and or repay it. And I'm just going to give you a heads up warning right now, because I spoke to a representative from Vanguard this morning and specifically asked about the CARES Act and this idea that if you take funds out, you'll be able to put them back in without penalty. And this representative told me that you have to put it back in 60 days. I don't believe that is correct. That is traditionally you could withdraw, and if you put the funds back in over 60 days, there was no penalty. But just be careful that there is a lot of misinformation out there, and even those experts who handle your retirement accounts may not be clear about the CARES Act. And this is true of a lot of the quick funding, that there's confusion over who qualifies for the grants or how the loans work. The other piece of this is the IRA distributions only apply if you have been affected by the coronavirus. And that's defined as a person who's diagnosed with coronavirus, spouse or dependent is diagnosed with coronavirus, who experiences adverse financial consequences as a result of being quarantined, being furloughed or laid off, having reduced hours, being unable to work due to lack of childcare, closing or reduced hours of a business owned or operated by the participant, or any other factor determined by the Secretary of the Treasury. So there, as of today, I checked again, I cannot find any guidance from the Secretary of the Treasury in terms of what those other factors may be. And again, right now it's kind of like taking you at your word. There's no indication as to what documentation you may need to show that you've been affected by the coronavirus. So before you jump down this path, if you can wait until there's further guidance, and some of these, especially the large retirement funds, are set up to figure out, how you can repay the funds back. I would suggest waiting if you can. So there is confusion. So now we're going to talk about these 3 items that you really need to do during the pandemic, and that is to ramp up your savings. And I want you to think about just how you respond to stress, because perhaps this is definitely a high stress period for, I think, everyone. And so we all respond to stress very differently. By the way, I am going to, don't worry about taking notes. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you this, but I will make this preview version of this presentation available to you. So after this presentation is finished, I'll send you the link. It includes all of the downloads and all of the active links. So don't worry about taking any notes tonight. So how do you respond to stress? I think a lot of people have been cleaning their house. It's a lot of clean houses in the neighborhood. And that's a helpful thing to do. Ignoring the entire situation, that's not going to move you forward. Selling things you don't use. I think as people are cleaning and somewhat decluttering, they're finding ways to get rid of some of the things, or sell or donate things that they don't use. There's a lot of conspiracy theories on the internet. That's not helpful for anybody. Exploring side hustles, absolutely. This is a perfect time to do that. Losing sleep from worrying, but you refuse to address the problem. Not at all helpful, folks. Now, plan and prepare a week's worth of home-cooked meals, very helpful. Drown your sorrows in wine. Helpful maybe for a little while, but in the long run, not all that helpful. Schedule walks outdoors or try out an online yoga class, very helpful. Buy stuff you don't need online. This is oftentimes called retail therapy. And this is probably the worst time to do something like that. So just think about how you respond to stress. Some of the non-helpful things that you might do, try to do more helpful things. So what's going to happen if your paycheck ends, and maybe it already has, or you incur high medical costs? Well, long before this coronavirus came along, people have traditionally not been very good at saving. So about half of Americans say they live paycheck to paycheck, and 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. And this is true for even, middle class, white collar office workers who are making decent money. Our society focuses on consumerism, buy, buy, buy. So a lot of folks don't have any emergency funds at all. And if that is you, know that you're actually in the majority. So one of the things that we're going to look at a bit is unemployment benefits, because that's also changed. If you have already lost your job, or your job is in jeopardy, or you've lost hours, there are some new revisions to the unemployment benefits. And the federal law provides the states a lot of flexibility to pay the benefits where an employer temporarily ceases operations due to COVID-19, preventing employees from coming to work. An individual is quarantined with the expectation of returning to work after the quarantine is over. And an individual leaves employment due to a risk of exposure or infection, or to care for a family member. So those unemployment benefits have become much more liberal in 2020. And the new federal law allows states to extend the benefits to self-employed and gig workers. So if you are out there, doing some consulting online, you can also qualify. I know that there are a number of hoops, as I've been reading. Sometimes you may need to qualify for regular unemployment and be denied, and then they bump you into this system. I've also read that there are millions of people still waiting to get their unemployment checks. So there are some problems with the system. The federal law provides, so if you're a self-employed or a gig worker, you can qualify, and it provides an extra $600 per week, as well as an additional 13 weeks of benefits. So unemployment laws have, benefits have definitely changed, at least in the near future. This is a link to a website. It's called Career One Stop. Because unemployment benefits are all statewide, what you're going to do here is select your state, and it will give you the information that you need to apply for benefits. And again, I know that a lot of the unemployment offices have been so busy that people can't get through. Hopefully, if you have a decent employer, they will help you set up unemployment benefits if possible. So one of the things we're going to talk about now is, how prepared are you? An easy way to just start getting a handle on your financial situation is to complete a net worth statement. All it is adding up your assets, or the things that you own, and subtracting the liabilities, or the things that you owe. So it's really nothing major. I have a worksheet that you can download, and it will run all of these calculations for you directly. I've also, this is sort of a new piece, the total cash and investment assets. That's an addition that I created to give you a sense of the monies that you can easily access, the non-retirement accounts and things that where you won't be penalized on. So when you get a chance, download and complete the net worth statement. So if you're looking for emergency funds, what should you tap into? I mean, certainly, ideally, you've got something here, something going for you that you've got, you can tap into. And let's talk about 3 different tiers. So your first choice is going to be cash, checking and savings accounts and CDs, maybe a home equity loan or a line of credit, and check your credit card points. If you've got cash back, this might be the time to cash some of that in. So these are all very easily accessible, very low to no penalties, and things that you might be able to get relatively quickly. So that's your first choice. Your second choice is going to be, I mean, if you have to put money onto, you have to start using your credit card, and you can get a 0% balance transfer with some introductory rate. This might be the time to do it. And again, I mean, I discourage generally credit card debt, but if you need the funds and you can get a 0%, say for 18 months, this would be that would be a smart choice. Look at store cards to see what those terms are. Maybe a personal loan from a family member. Look at your employer benefits. Are they offering any types of loans or any types of deals? You can tap into your Roth IRA, the contributions that you've made for at least 5 years plus, generally not the interest, but the contributions. So that's an option. Peer-to-peer lending, your 401k, this again depends on your employer. The challenge is if you're going to borrow from it, typically you have to pay it back before you leave that employer, before your employment ends. So it's not free money, and it may be difficult to pay that back if your job ends. And I'm also going to put down here a college fund. So far, I think that the penalties are still holding, but if you've saved up, a considerable amount of funds for your child or your children, you've got to, if you're having difficulty buying food and putting a house over your head, paying your mortgage, take some out if you need to. You can put monies back in later, but this is an emergency, so don't feel guilty and for having to tap into that fund if you have to. The third choice, I really even hate to include this, is a title loan like from your car or a payday loan. These are exploitative lending practices, incredibly high interest rates. Don't do this unless you absolutely have to. So again, focus what you can, on the first choice. If you don't have anything in here now, well, here's your wake-up call. It's time to really fill up that emergency fund. So your action is to accelerate your emergency savings. And how do you do that? And we're going to try to do it very, very quickly. So the first thing is to cut the expenses. And most of your expenses come from what are called the big 3: housing, transportation, and food. And quite likely you've already cut a lot of this out because we can't go anywhere. Most of us are under a quarantine, and you can't go out to restaurants, you can't go to the concert, you can't go to the baseball game. There's nothing really going on, and maybe you're able to eat takeout every once in a while. But more and more people are finding that they can cook, and they can save a lot of money by preparing their own food. And so these things you've naturally had to do, limit your entertainment, but also look at subscriptions that you don't use. If you still are a hooked onto a cable or satellite TV, that's usually a giant expense that really think about seriously. What do you need? Downsizing the car. Some people find that they've got 2, even 3 cars, and maybe they can get rid of one, or maybe they can trade in a expensive one for something that's a little bit older but reliable. So that's an option. Using public transportation, if it's safe, if you can do that. And then also this is a good time to look into refinancing your house. So you're bringing your monthly payments down. The interest rates are very, very low right now. So if you can refinance, that's a way to cut your expenses. So that's one side of the equation. And the other side is to grow your income. Easier said than done when people are becoming unemployed. If you still have your job and you can work overtime, do it. Try to put all that overtime pay into an emergency fund. If you can grab a part-time job, one that you feel safe doing, try it out. This is also a great time to look for a side hustle and really look at things that you can do online in your own time, things that you could do in addition to a job or that might replace some of your income. So those are some of the strategies to grow your income. And what you're aiming for is the summit. This is really your race. You don't have, if you don't have 1, 2, 3, 4 or more months of emergency savings to cover you, you've really got to cut those expenses and increase the income as fast as you can. So some of the ways you can accelerate your emergency savings is take the money diet, only buy essentials for a month. That's it. Just really focus on that. And some of you may be doing that naturally, selling stuff you don't need. And again, some of this you've got to be really cautious about. Renting out a room or part of your house. Can you do that safely? Diverting retirement contributions and diverting any college contributions into your emergency savings. You can transfer credit card balances to low introductory rates, and you can make just the minimum payments if needed. I mean, I like to pay off the full balance, but if things are tight, I'm going to just make the minimum payments, and when things get better, I'll pay off the full balance. The other reminder, practice social distance. So whatever you're doing, if you're selling stuff, use a strategy that keeps you both safe. So that is what you want to do to accelerate your emergency savings. And you can go this is my website, drbrendamoneycoach.com. And I have a page here of free resources. So just take a look at, you can download any of these for free. Lifestyle Planner, Habit Loop Builder, the Where's the Money worksheet. So that's all available to you. And again, I will give this preview version to you, so it will have all of the active links in it. And another resource is to keep up to date on potential government resources. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a website, and there's some information there as to what to do if you're having trouble paying your bills, how to contact your lenders and creditors, if you're having trouble paying your mortgage or your student loans. So this is a website that you might want to look at. Also, be aware of scammers. There's a lot of people out there who want to take your stimulus check, who want to exploit you. So be really careful at this time of scammers who make all kinds of empty promises. So let's look at the second piece. The second piece is this: don't panic. The worst thing that you can do is panic. And so if you've looked at your retirement account, or today is April 15th and the S&P dropped 2.2%, okay? It's like, oh my God, in one day I've lost 2% of my life savings. That may or may not be true, because a lot of us are not totally invested in stocks, but it hurts. So, oh my goodness, I just lost 20% of my savings. What should I do? And this is some pain we are all feeling now. So this is as of April 14th, and this is what we've experienced over the last year. So we've typically had, market goes up, market goes down. This is the S&P 500, and we saw this enormous decline in March. And you can see it is starting to come back up, but we're in for quite a long ride, I think. So this is the point where, are we slipping into a recession or a depression, or what's going on? And you're losing at least a lot of money, probably at least when you look at your account. So one of the things that might make you feel a little better is if we look at this in a larger perspective. So if we look at world epidemics and the global stock market performance, and you can see things have gone up and things have gone down. The latest, the big real epidemic or pandemic was Ebola, which was October 2018, and you can see that the world index declined, and it did go back up. And there's not always a relationship between these pandemics and the stock market. So it's difficult to say what to expect, but there's evidence that shows that we generally bounce back. There's an upward trend. The other piece that's crazy right now is volatility. There are just wild swings. So today, down 2.2%, and then maybe on Friday it'll go up 2%. It's just been crazy. So the periods here, you can see most of the time its volatility is generally under 5%. Here, these peaks, so you can see this is 2008 and through 2009, as we went through the housing crisis and that recession. That was the last major volatility. And we've had some in between, but now we're going up to volatility of 20%. So the S&P is swinging to more than 20% over a week's time or a 10-day period. So it has been very, very volatile. And hopefully, again, this is in a long-range perspective. This is a short-term volatility. So hopefully you can hang on until things even out. So one of the things you can do now is check your portfolio. So let's talk a little bit about risk. So generally, if the lower the risk, the lower the return. So if you have cash and money market accounts, you know that they're not paying you much or nothing in interest, but your money is also there. It's generally not going down. And a little bit of a higher risk is really bonds. So you may lose a little bit, you may gain a little bit, but the risk level is a little bit higher than cash, but it's not too bad. So as you move up here, this is real estate intangibles. So I think, a lot of people have gotten used to the idea that real estate is always a good investment. We learned otherwise in 2008 and 2009. As someone who is trying to sell my house and finding that the prices are going down and people are not buying, I'm also experiencing that whole pain of having funds tied up in real estate and then not being able to sell them. So it is a little bit higher on the risk level. And then the highest risk and the highest return and the highest losses are from stocks. So this is a good time to look at where your money sits, especially your retirement accounts. Are you at a risk level that makes you comfortable? Now, let's talk a little bit about questionnaires, because if you've visited a financial advisor, a financial expert, maybe they gave you a questionnaire. You might have done this online, and they'll ask you a couple of questions, usually like, let's say you have $100,000 and you lose 10% of your funds in 1 week. what will you do? Will you invest more? Will you pull out? Will you just hang tight? The thing is, theoretically, you think you know what you're going to do, but when the time comes, people behave quite differently. So those questionnaires really don't predict behavior. So you might come across as a conservative investor, but in reality, you're really taking higher risks than you think you should be. So anyway, risk tolerance is a psychological, multidimensional trait. It's not easily measured by a questionnaire. And a lot of this is driven by our emotions. So we see things crash. It's like, oh my God, I got to get out today because I still have some money left. I could lose it all by next week. So it's very emotionally driven. So there are two common strategies to allocate your resources. The first, this is really very simple. So let's take 120 minus your age, and that's the percentage that you should have in high-risk options like stock. So if you're age 30, 120 minus 30, 90% in stocks. Age 50, 70% in stocks. Age 70, 50% in stocks. So that's one way to look at it. I consider that to be highly arbitrary, and it doesn't really take into account the timeline as to when you need this. So for instance, I would like to retire early. So do I really want 60% of my stocks, of my portfolio in stocks at the age of 60? That might be too aggressive for me. So there's another approach that I greatly prefer, and it's one that I use. It's a bucket strategy. Think about when you need the funds. So if you need funds in the next 5 years, you put them in a low risk category. So you want money markets, you want savings accounts, you want CDs, maybe some in bonds. But the idea is you want to get these funds out and you don't want to see big losses. Then think about the funds you may need in 5 to 9 years. And those can go into more moderate risk, maybe bonds, some real estate. And then the higher risk are things that you might want to draw out in 10 years or more. So for instance, if you're writing this out now and you're 55 years old, hopefully you're not going to access this stuff in 10 years. This thing should be much, much better so you can ride it out. Whereas if you're 70 years old and you've got all your funds in stocks right now, you're gonna be feeling a lot of pain because you're gonna be selling at a low price, and that's a high risk gamble. So this bucket strategy is a really good approach and pretty easy to implement. So what should you do now? Well, the stock market's going up, going down. Do nothing, ride it out. This is what I recommend and what most of the experts recommend. Don't pay attention to what's going on every day. Just ride it out. Another option is to time the market. So I'm going to sell now and I'm going to buy back in later. The question is, do you have a crystal ball? Do you know what's really going to happen in 6 months? So you might sell now and think you're going to buy back in later. Well, you might be selling at are you selling at a low price? Are you selling at a high price? Is the company going to be there in 6 months? So there's just too much risk involved with this, and most people fail. It's just a lot of luck. And option 3 is to panic, to sell the stocks and then put it into cash. Now what you've done is you've taken your paper losses and you've turned them into real losses. So this is not the time to panic. I know it might feel like it's the safe thing to do, but you've just locked in your losses. So let's go to that third step. And this is where I want to empower you. I want you to create an emergency financial plan, one that fits your circumstances, one that fits, where you are with your finances and your priorities. And this is the time for planning. And this is really difficult to know where we are with this right now. It changes all the time. So, you know, there's talk of reopening the economy and things, you know, may start to loosen up in May and June. It's difficult to tell. But what it does seem to expect is that we're going to have periods where we contain it, and then coronavirus is going to get reintroduced to the community, and this may go back and forth over the next 4 to 6 months. And so that's the best guess. And I hope that in September, when I'm updating all this information, that we will have this time frame will have really changed and worked in our favor. But there's also, you know, we're expecting occasional outbreaks long after, you know, into 2021. So, and a lot of this does depend on vaccines and whether we're able to get tested and find out if we already have had it. Do we have antibodies that make us immune from the effects of coronavirus? So there's a lot of scientific data as well as public health information that is probably going to make the biggest impact in how we recover and when we recover. And so there's talk of the next 12 to 18 months of being in a recession and some, hopefully, a recovery. So this is not a short-term problem. Unemployment claims. This is, I think from April 4th, nearly 17 million unemployment claims in 3 weeks. And so I've seen some projections of unemployment rates reaching 32%. So this is just an unprecedented moment in our history. It is a very stressful time. So you're worried about your job, you're worried about your retirement, you're worried about your family. So what I want you to do now, and I'm very glad that you joined me in this webinar because we're looking at some difficult things. I want you to just relax for a bit, take a deep breath. We're going to move on, but I don't want you to feel hopeless or that it's all bad news, because you do have some control. You do have some things that you can do. So one of the actions is just prioritize your physical and mental health. If you're working at home like a lot of us are, it's relatively isolating. It's difficult to be productive. It's not an easy situation. So take the time to meditate and exercise. This might be a good time to practice cooking skills, try some new recipes. One of the things you can do that's going to help you is limit the screen time. Don't watch those briefings that are every day that are just become politicized and full of bad information, and just they're not constructive. So limit your screen time. Do connect with family and friends. Make phone calls, make video calls. This is a great time to read some great books if you can. Take up a new hobby, dust off an old one. Binge watch your favorite series, take walks, keep a gratitude journal, write that novel. So this is an opportunity that you have to sort of get away from all of the pushes on you to spend, and do this and do that, and focus inward and really take some actions to prioritize your physical and mental health. I've included a download here. This is my superhero checklist. And I created this as part of my course on financial freedom. And it's just a checklist on things that you can do, but it's about goal-getting, you know, things that you can do. Use mindfulness, create a powerful morning routine, make a to-do list before you go to sleep. So there are all kinds of tips in here. And again, you can download this. I'll give this to you after the webinar. And go ahead and, you know, fill it out, use it. So I want you now to take action. How do you create an emergency financial plan? This is the big goal of tonight. It's really just 5 steps. And I don't want to make this difficult. And I've used some pets in here because, you know, this is all very stressful. I'm talking about money, I'm talking about emergencies, so I want to associate something pleasant. So here's a cute little cat with a bandana on. So first step is to take an inventory. Know your starting point by calculating your net worth. And that's going to give you a really easy view of your assets and your liabilities. I also want you to record your login information so that if you fall ill or you just can't manage your accounts, somebody else can do it for you, a trusted person, very trusted person. Your second step is to estimate those trimmed down expenses. So you're going to go back and track your spending and mark, you know, was this a want or was this a need? And you're going to cut those expenses, cut the wants, and you're going to come up with a basic or a core budget. And then the third thing, we're just going to do some simple math. We're going to calculate how long your money is going to last. So you're going to use that core budget, determine how much money you need to cover for 1 to 6 months of expenses. Then you're going to look at your assets that you currently have, and you're just going to divide. So you do all that, you'll know how many months of living expenses you can currently cover. And I hope it's months. Some of you, it may just be weeks, but we got to start with the data. Your step 4 is going to boost your cash reserves. So you're going to take immediate steps. You're going to divert funds into your savings accounts. You're going to boost the amount of savings. Hopefully, you know, this is going to vary. If you're still working full-time or even part-time, you can do things. If your hours have been cut or you're laid off or unemployed, this is going to be really challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. It is. And then your 5th step is to make your plan. So you're going to write down your goals. You're going to include a date, and then you're going to create an action plan to help you reach those goals. And that's really it. This is the time for you to think outside the box. It's the time to explore all those options. You know, there are things that you might not have thought of that now you're like, you know what, maybe I don't need this and I can sell it. Maybe I could make a little money doing X, Y, and Z. So do the best that you can, and you might just find that your level of anxiety and stress actually goes down, and that's going to feed into better health. And I really think you can do this. I'm going to make it easy for you because I have a template, and this is, again, you'll have this preview version, and you'll be able to download the emergency plan template yourself. But this is what it looks like. We talk about the different types of emergencies. Here's step 1, taking an inventory. And I give you the links to do your net worth statement, to do your wants versus needs documentation. I give you step 2, estimate your trimmed down expenses. And then I walk you through the math on figuring out how long your money is going to last. Boosting your cash reserves. If you still have a paycheck, you've got some time. So here are some tips for you. If your job is at risk or your hours are cut, you might want to explore these steps. And I provide some resources here as well. This is some COVID-19 updated information on unemployment. So this is the Unemployment Benefits Finder, but I'm also giving you a resource that's called the Side Hustle Navigator. Help you experiment and think about how you might create a side hustle. Your 5th step is to make your plan. So you're going to write down, I have, you know, this amount of money that I can access in an emergency. My goal is to boost my savings account to this amount by this date. And I've given you examples. So I want you to take steps within the next 48 hours. So by the time it's Friday evening, you've already done 1 or 2 things to move yourself forward. So an example, tomorrow I'm going to go online to help my retirement and college fund contributions. I'm going to take that amount, automatically send it to my savings account on each payday. There's an action, and that's going to boost my savings by such and such by my target date. The second action, I'm going to come up with 3 potential side hustles by Saturday. I'll examine the resources available at Side Hustle Nation and Side Hustle School over the next 3 days. I'll complete the Side Hustle Navigator and set deadlines for launching my side hustle. My side hustle should add X amount of dollars to my savings by my target date. So those are examples. Those are things that you can do. I want you then to take actions. So you're going to write down what you're going to do, how it's going to boost your savings, and then notes to help you achieve your action plan. So that's the template that you will have available to you. So a lot of this, all of this, you can do on your own. So I really want to thank you for being here, but let's talk about if you would like a little bit more help. So I'm giving you the link of my Facebook group. It's on financial preparedness, and I have resources there and tips, special offers. So you can join my Facebook group for free. I have an emergency planning page on my website. So if you, I've got resources there. I'm offering a couple of individual one-on-one sessions. So I offer 3 questions in 30 minutes. So you can discuss, you can ask, three of your major concerns or issues. We discuss it in 30 minutes. One-on-one strategy sessions. These are 60-minute one-on-one strategy sessions. I'll help you build that emergency financial plan and identify the resources. And then I'm also doing virtual workshops. So I limit this to 8 participants. It's 2 90-minute sessions in 1 week. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays, either 11 in the morning Eastern time or 7 p.m. Eastern time. And so that's also an option. The goal is to do this as quickly as we can. So within 1 week, you've got both of those workshops and you will have your own emergency financial plan. And I'm also working on the emergency financial planning course. This is going to be a self-paced online course. I'll walk you through all of the steps, and that's going to be housed at Dream Big Money Academy. If you have any questions at all, or there's a way that I can be of assistance, feel free to email me. If you have questions about some of the offerings or what resources, go ahead and email me. And I just want to thank you tonight for joining me in this webinar. I am doing these webinars weekly. My goal is to reach as many people as I can, so please share this information. And I also am working to update it. So every Wednesday, I provide the latest data, any new resources. So please join me again if you like. So thank you very, very much for being here. Be well.